In 1943, when the first massive American fighters began appearing over occupied Europe, German pilots squinted through their canopies and laughed. It looked wrong. Too big, too bulky, too heavy to be dangerous. Compared to the sleek lines of the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the aggressive profile of the Focke-Wulf FW-190, the American P-47 Thunderbolt seemed almost absurd. Its fuselage was thick, its nose was enormous, its wings broad and heavy. It didn't look like a duelist, it looked like a flying barrel. Luftwaffe veterans hardened by years of combat believed agility was everything. Tight turns, quick climbs, graceful energy fighting. The Thunderbolt, weighing nearly 8 tons when loaded, looked like it belonged in a bomber formation, not escorting it. Some German pilots reportedly nicknamed it the milk bottle, or simply the jug, mocking its round fuselage. They assumed it would be slow to climb and easy to outmaneuver, and early encounters seemed to confirm their confidence. At lower altitudes, the P-47 was not as nimble as its German counterparts. But what they did not yet understand was that the Thunderbolt had not been built for elegance. It had been built for war at altitude, and at 25,000 feet, the rules changed.
The Thunderbolt was the creation of Georgian-born designer Alexander Kartveli. When the United States Army Air Forces demanded a high-altitude escort fighter capable of protecting bombers deep into enemy territory, Kartveli did not design a lightweight dancer. He designed a machine that could survive. At the heart of the P-47 was the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 Double Wasp, one of the most powerful radial engines of the war. Producing over 2,000 horsepower, it gave the aircraft enormous speed in a dive and tremendous durability. Unlike liquid-cooled inline engines, the radial engine could absorb punishment and keep running. But the real secret weapon was its turbo supercharger system. Mounted in the rear fuselage and fed by long ducts, it allowed the Thunderbolt to maintain power at high altitude where other fighters struggled. Above 20,000 feet, the P-47 was no lumbering target. It was fast, very fast. It could exceed 430 miles per hour in level flight and dive even faster. German pilots who tried to chase a diving Thunderbolt often found themselves unable to catch it, or worse, overstressing their own aircraft. Then there was the armor. Thick skin, reinforced structure, self-sealing fuel tanks. The P-47 could absorb damage that would tear other fighters apart. And finally, its most feared feature. 8.5 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 4 in each wing. When those guns fired together, they unleashed a storm of nearly 100 rounds per second. The laughter was about to stop.
The turning point came during the daylight bombing campaigns over Germany. American B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators pushed deeper into hostile skies. They needed protection from intercepting fighters. Early escort fighters lacked the range or altitude performance to stay with the bombers all the way to their targets. The P-47 stepped into that role. Initially, its range was limited, but even in partial escort missions, it made its presence felt. When German fighters dove through bomber formations, they found themselves intercepted by Thunderbolts that could dive faster and hit harder. The 8.50s were devastating. Concentrated fire shredded enemy aircraft. Wings snapped. Engines burst into flame. Control surfaces disintegrated under the hail of heavy machine gun rounds. German pilots began reporting something new. The big American fighter was not easy prey. It could dive away if threatened. It could climb with power at altitude. And if you made a mistake and drifted into its sights, the results were catastrophic. In 1943 and early 1944, P-47 units, such as the 56th Fighter Group, began racking up impressive kill totals. Pilots like Francis "Gabby" Gabareski became aces flying the Thunderbolt. Gabareski alone would score 28 aerial victories in Europe. The Jug had earned respect, not because it turned tighter, but because it hit like a hammer and refused to die. As the air war evolved, so did the P-47's mission. With the arrival of longer-range escort fighters like the P-51 Mustang, the Thunderbolt increasingly took on a new role: ground attack. And here, its size became an advantage. The P-47 could carry bombs, rockets, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. It became a flying artillery piece. During the Normandy campaign following D-Day in June 1944, Thunderbolts roamed over France, hunting trains, trucks, tanks, and troop columns. German ground forces came to fear the distinctive growl of the radial engine overhead. The Thunderbolt's rugged construction allowed it to dive steeply toward targets, unleash rockets or bombs, and pull out under heavy anti-aircraft fire. It could return to base riddled with holes, cylinders shot out, control surfaces damaged, yet still flying. Pilots often joked that if you could keep the engine running and the wings attached, the Jug would bring you home. By late 1944, P-47s were destroying locomotives, cutting supply lines, and hammering German armor during the Battle of the Bulge. The once mocked fighter had become one of the most effective fighter-bombers of the war. On the ground, German soldiers learned to dive for cover at the sight of its broad wings. The joke had become a nightmare. By the end of World War II, more than 15,000 P-47 Thunderbolts had been built. It was one of the most produced American fighters of the war. Its kill-to-loss ratio in air combat was impressive. In the European theater, P-47 pilots were credited with thousands of enemy aircraft destroyed in the air and on the ground. They also destroyed tens of thousands of vehicles and countless locomotives. But perhaps its greatest strength was survivability. Many pilots owed their lives to the Thunderbolt's toughness. Stories abound of aircraft returning with massive damage, chunks missing from wings, bullet holes covering the fuselage, engines barely functioning, yet still landing safely. German pilots who had once laughed came to respect it. They learned not to underestimate the big radio fighter. They understood that a diving P-47 was one of the most dangerous sights in the sky. It may not have been the most graceful aircraft of the war. It may not have turned like a Bf-109 or climbed like an FW-190 at low altitude, but it was reliable, brutal, relentless. The P-47 Thunderbolt proved that war does not reward beauty. It rewards strength, firepower, and endurance. In the vast skies over Europe, what began as a joke became a symbol of American industrial power and aerial dominance. When those 850s opened fire, laughter vanished and thunder rolled across the continent.